You don't get to love me now. That is what my ex-husband said when I showed up on his porch with a lasagna and a shaky apology 4 summers ago. I was 49 years old, sunburned, clutching a casserole dish like armor, and he didn't even open the screen door. He just looked at me through the mesh and said it. You don't get to love me now. I wish I could tell you this story ends with a miraculous second chance. It doesn't. It ends with a truth I should have learned decades earlier, and a wedding I watched from my car, palms sweating on the steering wheel while the church bells rang for someone else. Here is the ugly of it, quick and sharp, because I promised myself I would stop hiding behind pretty words. Me, female, 60 years old. Ex-husband, male, 62 years old. We married at 19 and 21 because we were reckless and romantic and thought rent would magically pay itself if we kissed hard enough. By 26, we had 2 little kids and a pale blue sedan that rattled if you drove past 50. He was the quiet one, a bookish guy who could fix a faucet and sit with our toddler for hours building block towers. I was the loud one, sales rep, then team lead, then district, then the person in a pencil skirt clacking down airport concourses at midnight. People hear cheating and think there is one big moment, a neon sign. For me, it started small, like a slow leak. A hotel bar in Omaha. You killed that presentation, said a man with a crooked tie and a laugh that sounded like a dare. The room smelled like lime wedges and tired carpet. I didn't say no because I had plans to be special, and special people don't scrub spaghetti pots at midnight. I told myself he, my husband, the quiet one, would understand if I was a little late, a little unavailable, a little carved out by the job. He was homey, after all. Homey means resilient, right? Wrong. It means human. I wish I could tell you I confessed. I didn't. I wore my ring on the road and took it off in elevators. I sent postcards to my kids and spreadsheets to my team and stared at hotel ceilings wondering who I'd be if I hadn't chosen ambition like a religion. And still, if you asked me back then, I would have said I loved my husband. I would have insisted it. He didn't cheat, my best friend would later say, flat as a judge's gavel. He built a life. That line would follow me for years like a ghost with good posture. The night everything snapped, it wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming. The dishwasher was thrumming, the house smelled like lemon soap and baked ziti. He asked if I could switch the Thursday pickup because there was a parent-teacher conference. I told him I had a late flight. He nodded, then glanced at the laundry basket, overflowing with soccer socks I had promised to fold. It was a glance, not a complaint, but it sparked a mean little fire in me. I said something about not wanting to be a maid. He said he wasn't asking me to be. Then I said the cruelest sentence I've ever said. Maybe I married too young. He went still, like I'd slapped him. Our daughter colored at the kitchen table, purple marker squeaking across construction paper. Our son drummed a plastic spoon on the high chair tray. 2 weeks later, in a blur of bad choices, I left. Not for the crooked tie man specifically, he fizzled when real life showed up, but for the idea that somewhere else, someone would understand me without asking for anything. My husband stood in the doorway while I carried a suitcase past him. He didn't shout. He said, "Stay for dinner, please. The kids made you cards." I said I couldn't. I shut the sedan door, smelled the stale coffee in the cup holder, and drove to a rental apartment that echoed when I walked. Is betrayal the ultimate form of disrespect? Sometimes I still hear that question in my own voice, like I am the one cross-examining myself. I don't have a clever answer, only this. Disrespect is easy when you convince yourself your pain is the only kind that counts. I told myself I was drowning. I forgot that he was too. The comments people lob at cheaters could break windows. I have read versions of all of them, sometimes directed at me and sometimes at posts like mine. Selfish, narcissist, only sorry because you lost. The internet makes a choir of what you hope no one will say out loud. Real men can cook, one woman wrote under a story that mirrored ours, and do dishes without resentment. She was right. Do you know who cooked after I left? My ex. He taught himself. The way he taught our son fractions, slowly, with a YouTube channel and a lot of patience. When I dropped off the kids on Saturdays, the house smelled like cumin and garlic. He made tacos that would make you cry. He did the school runs. He learned the difference between ballet buns and top knots. Once, I stopped by midweek because our daughter had a fever. He was on the floor, testing bathwater with his wrist while humming some cartoon theme song under his breath. Our son slept on the couch, face flushed, a cool washcloth on his forehead. The living room light made everything golden. I stood there holding a pharmacy bag and felt like an intruder in my own life. The affair-adjacent freedom was a mess. The other man wasn't a villain. He was just a guy who liked the chase more than the catch. He disappeared into a new city before our lease on the fantasy expired. I started resenting alimony and child support like they were parking tickets from a town I no longer visited. I am ashamed to write that. I wrote checks with my jaw set and told myself I was being taken advantage of because my ex had to step back at work to manage school pickups. In work bathrooms that smelled like artificial grapefruit, I would stare at my reflection and think, you chose this, and still you hate paying for it? A friend, Maya, nurse, 40 years old then, blunt as a butter knife, said, "You left a home and got mad you lost warm meals. Be serious." She also asked me, softly, "Do cheaters ever feel real remorse?" My mouth opened and closed. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to talk about the way I woke up at 3 a.m, tasting guilt like pennies. Instead, I laughed it off. "I am not the devil," I said. But the truth is, remorse is not a speech. It is returning the library book you stole and paying the late fee every day for 30 years. By the time our divorce was finalized, he had stopped asking me to reconsider. The paperwork smelled like toner and bad coffee. He wore a navy sweater with a frayed cuff. I wore heels too high for the courthouse stairs. We split furniture like we were negotiating a hostage release. He kept the wooden salad bowl we bought at the farmer's market on our 5th anniversary. I kept the cast iron pan. He asked if I wanted our wedding album. I said no, flippant, like I was too cool to own proof of my own history. Later, alone in my apartment, I ate fried rice from a takeout box and stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder for a flight to Denver. The flight hummed through my next 10 years like a lullaby for the life I chose over the one I had. You want a midpoint twist? Here it is. I always thought I was the one telling myself a story to survive. Turns out, he had his own plot. The first time I saw him with someone else, I was dropping off the kids late because a client dinner ran long. It was raining the kind of rain that smells like hot asphalt and makes the whole street gleam. She opened the door. She was older than me by a few years, silver hair in a braid, a laugh that didn't sound like a dare. She wore a paint-splattered sweatshirt and smelled like basil and rain. "You must be Jenna," she said, sticking out her hand. "I'm Claire." I hated her immediately, then hated myself for hating her because she handed my daughter a towel and told my son to put his sneakers by the door so they would not track mud. She did it without checking my face for permission, like she lived there, like this was home. You imagine the villain is the new partner. You want to believe that if they are evil enough, then your choices were simply a misunderstanding. Claire ruined that for me. She wasn't my replacement. She was my correction. I sat in my car and watched through the rain-streaked windshield as my kids showed her a lopsided papier-mâché volcano. When the homemade lava bubbled, all 3 of them cheered. Then my ex looked out the window and saw me. He lifted a hand in a small wave that had more history in it than any speech I could make. I drove away with the radio off so I could hear my own breath and the windshield wipers arguing with time. That night, in my quiet apartment, I wrote a letter I never sent. Would you take back someone who begged for forgiveness? I wrote it as if I were writing to a forum of strangers, asking if Mercy has a return policy. The letter sat on my kitchen counter under a chipped mug for a year, absorbing the scent of coffee and the weight of every morning I didn't mail it. I wish I could say the realization made me noble. It didn't. It made me petty for a while. 2 weeks before their wedding, because yes, he marries Claire, and yes, they deserved every confetti toss of that day, I accidentally stopped by. My excuse was a library book. His yard smelled like cut grass and charcoal grill. Claire waved from the porch. She had soil on her palms and a smear of dirt on her cheek that looked like war paint. I pulled him aside by the hydrangeas and said it too fast, like ripping duct tape off skin. I still love you. He stared at me, then at the house, then back at me like I had spoken a dead language. Jenna, he said, soft and tired, you love the idea of being forgiven. That is different. He wiped his hands on his jeans. Then you should have fought for me, he said, not cruelly, just as a fact. Because I would have fought forever if you'd asked me to then. Only one life, I wanted to scream. Only one husband like you. But the only sound was the neighbor's dog barking and the crackle of chicken fat hitting the grill. When I got back to my car, my hands shook so hard I dropped the keys between the seat and the console. I fished for them while sobbing, pressing my forehead to the steering wheel. A line from somewhere in the internet chorus lodged in my head like a splinter. You can't lose what you smashed. I had smashed it. Now I was sitting in the pieces, bleeding. On the day of their wedding, I drove to the church and parked across the street. The bells rang, the air smelled like wet stone and lilies. Guests in bright dresses hurried along the steps. I told myself I would object, that I would make some grand gesture like in the movies where flawed people get redeemed because they are loud about it. Instead, I sat there with the windows cracked and listened to a radio preacher talking about confession. Not a Catholic confessional with a screen and a whispered act of contrition. A different kind, the kind where you tell the truth even if it changes nothing. When they came out, she had flowers in her hair and he had that look. Peaceful, like he had finally slept. My daughter tossed petals, my son clapped until his palms were pink. I did not honk, I did not cry loudly. I pressed my palm flat against the fabric of the passenger seat and whispered, "Be happy." It sounded like surrender and blessing at the same time. The years that followed were a syllabus in humility. I dated men who loved my laugh until they realized it meant I would laugh my way out of hard conversations. I learned to cook slowly, disastrously. Burned garlic smells like failure and lingers for days. I taught myself to sew a button back on a shirt. I learned how to apologize with specificity. Not, I am sorry for everything, but I am sorry I made you carry more than your share because I was scared of being ordinary. A therapist with a watercolor painting of a lake above her desk asked me to name the feeling under my anger. Shame, I said. Then grief, I said. Then something smaller, like a pebble in a shoe I couldn't remove. A relentless itch called pride. Sometimes I would sit on the bleachers at my son's high school games and pretend I was there as just a friend of the family. My ex would sit 2 rows down with Claire. They would share a bag of kettle corn, the sweet smell making my stomach twist. When our son scored, my ex would stand, clap, then turn to find me, as if to say, "Did you see?" Of course I saw. The boy has my stubborn chin and his father's soft eyes. After the game, my son would hug me, sweaty, deodorant and victory in his hair. He would say, "You coming to dinner?" Sometimes I did. Claire always set a plate for me, no matter how much I resented folding myself into the life that could have been mine. She'd say, "I made too much," which is the kindest lie hospitality tells shame. I used to wonder, should children know if one parent cheated? Our kids are grown now. They know the headline. They don't know every detail, because details are weapons, and I promised myself I would stop arming the past. They love me. They also remember who packed their lunches and who sat through ear infections and algebra meltdowns without flinching. Love plus memory equals boundaries. My daughter once said, "I love you, Mom, but you don't get to hate Claire." Fair. She was wearing her college hoodie and eating cold pizza. The room smelled like tomato sauce and new textbooks. I nodded and took a crust from the box like that absolved me. It didn't. It did mean I kept my mouth shut when I wanted to spit out the taste of envy. "Do you think trust can be rebuilt after this?" Someone asked me at a women's group once after I clumsily told a PG version of my story. Yes and no, I said. You can build something. It will be different. No romantic metaphor solves concrete physics. The beam you cracked will always be a beam you cracked. Bet you can decide to stop throwing rocks at the house. I did try, briefly, to stitch together a new romance with an old high school friend. Tom, 49 years old at the time, widower, gentle like fresh snow. He had a way of asking, "You okay?" that made you want to be honest. For a while, we were good. Sunday mornings smelled like pancakes and black coffee. He taught me the difference between a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver. I taught him how to haggle at flea markets for old vinyl records. But every time he asked where I wanted to eat, I heard a question that wasn't his. Would I always be the woman who ran when dinner felt like a test? We went to therapy. Could therapy fix something this broken? I wanted it to. The therapist gave us homework. List 3 things you appreciate about the other person, and 1 thing you need. I did the assignment, neat bullet points in a notebook with lemons on the cover. Tom wrote, "I need you to stop apologizing by making jokes." I laughed and said, "Sorry." We both stared at the floor. In the end, it wasn't Tom. It was the map in my head that ended everywhere in the same cul-de-sac. Guilt, with a cul-de-sac full of lawn flamingos that said, "Welcome, stay forever." We parted with kindness. Months later, he married a woman who looks like a sunrise and owns a bakery that smells like cinnamon at 6 in the morning. I buy bread there sometimes and don't say hi. More twist? I found out, years after the wedding, that the night I sat in my car debating whether to object, my ex had written a letter too. He never sent it. I learned this because our daughter, cleaning out the garage, found a box of old mail and thought the universe might be offering a history lesson. His letter was short. "I loved you," he wrote. "I wanted to keep loving you, but I cannot be the only one holding the rope." It was dated the month I announced I wanted more space, not knowing what that space would fill with. The letter smelled like cedar shavings from the pencil sharpener we kept near the phone back then. I held it and felt time fold like paper. I called him. "I found your letter," I said. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear a kettle whistle in the background, the click when he turned off the flame. "I wrote a lot of letters back then," he said finally. "Most were to myself." "Do you hate me?" The question came out raw, a scraped knee. "I don't hate you," he said. "I hate what it did to us." Then, because he is who he is, he added, "Do you want to come to Sunday dinner? Claire is making eggplant parm." The kitchen smelled like basil again in my memory, and I almost said yes. Instead, I said I would bring dessert. It was less about the food and more about showing up without kicking over the furniture. Redemption is not a courtroom verdict. It is a daily chore chart. I do not get points for suffering. I get peace when I carry my part. So I show up. I show up at birthdays with gifts chosen for the person they are, not the role I wish I still had. I babysit my grandchildren and teach them how to make paper boats that actually float in the sink. The bathroom smells like watermelon shampoo and damp towels. The tiles squeak under our wet feet. I tell them stories where the hero is humble and learns to keep promises even when it rains. The internet chorus still sings sometimes. I hear echoes of the roast. "You only regret it because you ended up alone." Maybe regret waits until the house is quiet to climb into your lap. But there is another truth. Sometimes, the realization that you are not the main character in every scene is the beginning of becoming a decent supporting one. That is not a meme. It is the only way I know to stop bleeding on the people who did not cut me. A friend from those early messy years, Maya, still blunt, now a grandmother herself, once slid a slice of pecan pie toward me across a diner table and said, "Learn to sit with empty." The diner smelled like coffee and syrup. The short order cook called out orders like a carnival barker. I said, "Empty is loud." She said, "Then turn down the pride." I wrote that on a sticky note and stuck it on my bathroom mirror. Some mornings, I still have to say it out loud. "Here's your bumper sticker," my therapist joked once when I was spiraling. "Don't set fires and complain about smoke." We laughed. I wrote that one down too. 2 memeable truths in one paragraph. Look at me, evolving. I have not apologized on a porch with lasagna since that first time. I have said, I am sorry, plenty, but not to win anything. If there is a scoreboard, I cannot see it. What I can see, my ex cutting a slice of cake for our grandson with the same gentle concentration he used to untangle our daughter's kite string. Claire handing me Tupperware as I leave, the night air smelling like cut grass and faraway rain. Me, in the car, hands steady on the wheel for once, not parked across the street from a church, but actually driving home. If you are waiting for me to say I would do it differently and then list 100 if-onlys, here is the cleanest version I can offer. I would tell the truth sooner. I would trade that hotel bar flirtation for a night of folding laundry with music too loud and the windows open. I would learn to cook because feeding people is a love language, not a gendered chore. I would notice the way resentment molds in the corners when you do not air out a room with conversation. I would say to my husband, I feel left behind. And then I would listen when he said, I am scared you will leave. Then I would stay long enough to prove we could both be afraid and still choose us. But this is not a time machine. It is a record. I am writing this for the people hovering on the edge of a cliff they think is a doorway. You are not a monster for wanting more. You are responsible for how you go about getting it. A person you love is not a wall in your way. They are a person. He didn't cheat. He built a double life, someone wrote about a man like me once. I want to add, the cruelest part is not the double life you build. It is the one you burn without giving the other person a chance to grab the photo albums on the way out. So here are my 3-second truths. I cheated. I left. I wanted forgiveness more than I wanted to be forgivable. Here is my 30-second teaser of an ending. I did not get my husband back. I got a family I can sit with without itching to run. The climax was not me at a church door. It was me, years later, handing Claire my famous lemon bars and meaning it when I said, thank you for loving them. If I am allowed one question to toss into the crowd, it is this. How do you measure growth? The number of apologies you make or the number you no longer need? The internet will have opinions. It always does. And me? I will turn off my phone, rinse the mixing bowl that smells like lemon zest and sugar, and hope that tonight I dream of a blue sedan that does not rattle, a kitchen where 2 people take turns stirring, and a love that doesn't have to be rescued at the church steps because it was never abandoned on the front porch.